Seconded. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Contrary-minded? Motion carried. First item is a presentation from Dean Shea, Development Agreement Fencing Requirement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just before Mr. Shea's presentation, I guess, wanted to take a minute to remind the committee where we're at. So Mr. Shea applied for an amendment to a development agreement to change the type of fencing specified in that development agreement. In the DA, it specifies that an opaque wooden fence be built. And when we did our post-construction review of the property, we noticed that it was actually a chain link fence with the privacy slats in it. So that necessitated his application to amend the development agreement. Planning Advisory Committee recommended against that the application be turned down. Then council decided to table that motion until after you've heard from Mr. Shea. So that's where we're at. Now, following the presentation today, because that motion can only be lifted at council, you can discuss it. You could make a recommendation to council, but that motion itself could only be dealt with at council. Thank you.
So who's doing the presentation today? Mr. Shea? Is he coming up front? Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Go ahead.
Thanks. First, I wanted to thank council for agreeing to hear me out. The issue, as you guys are aware, is that I built a chain link fence instead of a wood fence on a property that I developed in Enfield. First of all, I wanted to let you know that I did not build the fence out of savings or trying to get away from the development agreement. I did not realize that it had to be a wood fence. So once the municipality let me know that it was requirement, I went through the paperwork to change it. So I also built the chain link fence very early on in the project. It wasn't just because of site work and the way the project went. It was one of the first things I did. So it wasn't something I waited to the very end and tried to slide under the radar. It was a mistake by me and a miss by me. But I wanted to let you understand how I got here. I got here by when I came for my DA, my development agreement, I came to council and there was a gentleman, Wade Lytle, that showed up, and his concern was his daughter lives next door, so and the headlights getting through and shining on her house. So at that meeting, council agreed to move ahead with the DA, but asked me to build an 8-foot fence. So right then and there, I thought, okay, I would definitely build a chain link fence just because of the structure and the difference between chain link and wood. So wood over 5 or 6 feet takes a lot of wind load and will not last very long. So I decided to do a chain link fence, not realizing it was in the DA to do a wood fence. So that's how I got to the chain link decision. And when I did it, I met with the neighbor through it. I brought the neighbor over. Mr. Lytle came to site, seen the fence. I explained what I was doing and why I was doing it, and he was very happy with the end result. And in my mind, I thought the whole process here and the spirit of the DA was to look out for the neighbor. So if you build a wood fence at 8 feet high, it's going to take a lot more wind load. It actually catches 3 times the wind load that a chain link fence does. And the other thing is I would have to leave gaps in the wood fence, which again, if you pulled in with your car, would allow light to shine through and would come onto the neighbor. So with the chain link fence and the slats, it keeps it completely sealed from the neighbor, and there's no light that gets through to their house. So in the spirit of the DA, I was doing the best decision I could make for the neighbor and trying to keep them happy through the process and make sure in the end that they were happy. So not understanding that I had to do a wood fence, that's how I got there. So I just wanted a chance to explain to council how I got there, and that I kept the neighbor involved the whole time, and why I made the decision to do a chain link fence wasn't to undermine the DA. It was to do the best for the neighbor. And there are plastic slats in the chain link fence, and they do blow out occasionally. But when they blow out, I have a super on site, and that superintendent can come out and quite easily replace those slats. So the next day you come out from a storm and there's some slats within an hour, the slats are back in and there's no light getting through to the neighbor. So with a wood fence, if that takes a storm and blows over or gets damaged, it's not a half an hour result to fix up. So I also wanted to say I understand that it is these DAs are not agreed to lightly, and that I understand that it's a legal requirement. And so in that, if council will work with me on the chain link fence, I am prepared to make a donation to any charity in East Hants that council feels is important, whether that's the food bank or fire department or another charity. I would sponsor $5,000 so that, hold myself accountable for the mistake, and to let council know it's not about the money, it's about doing the best for the neighbor and the DA. So I think that's in closing, I guess it was an oversight of mine. I am a businessman. I'm not hiding that. I have lawyers and architects, and it was a miss. It was a complete miss, not me trying to get away with something or not follow the DA. So I appreciate you hearing me out, and that's it.
Thank you. We have some councilors have comments, so. Councilor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So I did look into this fairly in depth when this first came to us back in May. Spoke with the homeowner. First of all, I will say that a chain link fence with slats in it does not provide the privacy of a wooden opaque fence when it's done properly. You can see through that fence. It says the resident, not her father, but the resident said to me, if you stand and wave on one side of the fence, someone can look over at you and wave back. It is not opaque. So my main concern is providing what was promised to the residents. The residents did go to the meeting. They were told it would be a wooden 8-foot opaque fence. And according to her, they did question someone on the job site and said, is that the fence that was supposed to go up? And they were told that's the one that's required. So they left it at that. She left it at that. She said the fence is up, so I didn't think there was anything I could do about it, and that was the end of it. They are in no way complainers, because a lot of people would have been to before us or been to the municipality to get this corrected. So it's not my intention to make a lesson of this or an example in any way. I just feel that they need that 8-foot wooden opaque fence. And what I'm suggesting is that the existing fence stay where it is, and that a wooden opaque fence be built on the resident's side to provide that privacy. That's my suggestion, so that the residents can get what they were told they were going to get, and it will provide them with more privacy than that opaque fence with the slats in it. I've been there at night because I have a family member who lives on the road, and there's lots of light coming through there. All the cars are lined right up to that fence. So if the cars are lined up to it and they live right here, there is definitely light getting through that fence, and I think that a wooden opaque fence would really improve that for them in their backyard. In addition, John, do you have, can you bring up a couple of those photos? So that is my suggestion, that we get a wooden opaque fence on the resident's side. And of course, if there's a stability issue, definitely having that beautiful fence there will affix to it. If it's affixed to it, that will solve the stability issue. As well, in addition, when I was looking into this, I found that the back of the building is really lit up. So the back of the building is about 3.5 stories because it's exposed, the bottom level, right next to this bungalow. There's 2 really bright lights shining down to light up the parking area, which I can understand why. But, so those are the two lights up high on the back of that building. If you can go to the next one, John. Sorry, I didn't send them in a very, so they're lighting up that fence. That was at 11 o'clock at night. So you can see how well lit up the parking. And as I say, I appreciate you lighting up the parking lot, but that's their yard right on the other side of it. Those birch trees lit up just like a movie theater there. So, and as well, you can see, if you look to the very right of that fence, you can see right through it to that white structure. So that's what I mean about it not being opaque. You can see right through those slats. So I'm suggesting that if those lights, they need to be adjusted downward, they need to be reduced in wattage, or they need to be replaced. Just because there's really no need to light the parking lot up like that at 11 o'clock at night. And you're also lighting up these folks' backyard in an unnecessary way. So those are the two changes that I'm looking for. And as well, I would like to add that I would like it done in an expedient fashion. This has gone on for a long time. And, you know, we've dragged it on a bit longer with waiting to get to council here. And if that could be done sooner rather than later, that would be great for the neighbors, especially with the warm weather when they're out in their backyards. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Garden Cole.
Okay.
Mr. Shea, would you like to comment on her?
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that I never spoke with Mrs. Lytle, but her father was the point of contact through the project, and he never once said anything about the fence other than he was very happy, and he was to site twice and met with Charles Sullivan, the site super, and both times he was quite happy. If he had said anything at that time, I would have tried to address it then, and it was never talked about as a white opaque fence or a wood fence at the council meeting or with the neighbor. It was just said that it was to be an 8-foot fence. So inside the development agreement is where they spoke about wood, not at the council meeting or not with the neighbor. The neighbor never gave any indication on if they wanted wood or chain link. And on the lighting side of things, I'm maybe the solution would be I could do a motion sensor, so maybe the light only comes on when someone's walking to their car. But if you turn those lights off, it's quite dark. So there's also tenants that live in that building that, you know, need to be able to safely get to their vehicle, especially in the wintertime if it's icy or snowy. So I'm happy to put maybe a sensor in that would come on and light the parking lot up. But I mean, I think the parking lot needs to be lit at some, maybe that's, I can change the wattage as well. I don't mind. But it does need to be lit up so people can see where they're going.
Follow up?
Yes,
Councillor?
please, thank you. So on 2 points, once again, I just want to I don't want the resident portrayed as a complainer at all, because if that was 95% of people, including myself, with a light like that in my backyard, never even mind the fence, I would be in protest. So she is not a complainer. But those lights are excessive. Like at 11 o'clock last night, that's what it looked like. I understand lighting up a parking lot, but that is way overkill, especially when it's shining into someone's backyard. So, you know, as I say, you don't have to take them out. I said maybe redirect or reduce the wattage, but just something that's much more neighbor-friendly than those. I think that typically parking lots would never be lit up that much. And if it weren't that it was in the area that it's in, but where it's right next to this person's house, I think that would be the friendly thing to do, and really needs to be done. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eisner.
Thank you, Chairperson. Tom Eisner, Councillor of the District, for that's my area. Never got a complaint from anybody. Personally, I like the fence you put there because I done wood ones and I've always found problems with them blowing. A lot of damage to them. Yours will always be in good shape. Even those vinyl slats, you can pull them out like you say. You can change them up different colors if you want. So there's lots of multi things you can do. When you got wood fence, you've got to put paint on it. You got to paint it every 3-4 years or less. Like I say, I think he did a good job there. I have a problem with your donut shop. I go there too much. But besides that, it's a nice, really nice building. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Carl McPhee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just give you a little anecdote. Before I knew there was any problem with this development, I went in one day just because I like Aroma Mayo coffee, thought I'd check out the new coffee shop, thought what a nice looking building, the shop's nice. I had to park down around back because there's not much parking for people going in there. And when I got out of the car, I thought, gosh, what a nice fence they put up. I'm glad they didn't put up an ugly wooden fence, because I know what wooden fences look like after a year or two. They never stand up. They always look horrible. I thought that was a beautiful fence. I like the fact that the slats were in there, because regardless of what kind of fence you build, you're not going to have an opaque, completely opaque fence unless you're going to put up plywood, and then you better be prepared to put up guy wires and that to keep it in place. You have to allow wind to blow through it, the load. To put up a solid wooden fence that size that didn't allow any wind through it would be practically impossible to maintain. Anyway, I thought it was a beautiful looking fence. Thought the whole development was nice. Then I heard about the controversy, so I was in the area again after dark, so I drove in, and with my car, sure enough, if the fence was only a 5 or 6 foot fence, my lights would have shone over top of it. So I can see the need for an 8-foot fence. An 8-foot wooden fence, like I say, I can't see it standing there. And so I really thought that the fence was very positive. I went and looked at it after I knew there was a controversy to see how it was constructed. It looked like it was done very well, should never break free or tip over. Plus, it kept continuity with the fence for the rest of the development. To the side of it, they have chain link fence. Yours could be fixed up a little bit, but it's been there for years. So overall, I thought, what a great job this contractor did, really thought about the neighbors. Didn't realize there would be a controversy on it. And just for anybody that might know, I do happen to be a fan of Frank Gehry, an architect who promotes chain link fences. So I think he does fabulous work. Chain link fences get a bad name just because some people see them as industrial, I guess. They don't have to be ugly. Never thought about the lighting. I'm opposed to ambient light pollution. I can see that if I lived next door, I wouldn't want that lighting there either. I can see why there is lighting, but yeah, possibly that's something you can correct, but that has nothing to do with the fence. So anyway, those are my observations. I'd like to see that we could make an amendment to allow the fence to stay there, possibly putting something up on the other side of it that is more acceptable to the neighbors would be a good idea. And obviously, if you build a wooden fence there, that's going to cut down any flash through the slats, so it would certainly help them. Those are my comments, but I don't think we should penalize anybody for basically going above and beyond what the development agreement called for, even though I realize it's outside of what the zoning allows. Maybe that's something we should correct or take another look at, is the zoning regulations, but that's a separate topic. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Can
Counselor Tingley.
To the chair. I just met Dean for the first time here just when I walked in, and I had spoken to him one other occasion. He called me. Apparently he knows my daughter, and I've asked my daughter and son about him, and they speak very highly of him, say he's a very considerate person, just a good all-around guy. And everything I've heard him talk about here, I think this is an honest mistake. There's no question about it. He did violate the bylaw. I did go down and have a look at this fence myself because I've got a fence issue in Lance, and I just wanted to go down and see what this fence looked at like. And while I was down there, the neighbors were out in their driveway I went in, the lady was there were some kids playing, and I assumed the husband, and told them who I was and why I was there, and asked them what they thought about the fence, and they indicated to me they had no problem with the fence. So to me, the question is, he's in violation of the bylaw. What's the right thing to do here? If there's any way to not penalize him, that's the way I would go. I'm not going to, I wouldn't ask him to tear down the fence, and I wouldn't ask him to build another fence. You know, we don't even have a complaint about the fence. There's nobody complaining about the fence. It's just, he's broken a rule here, and should we amend it? I know there's a section of the MGA that allows for squashing bylaws. I don't know if you can use it in this situation here or not. Maybe John could speak to that, or speak to, and I honestly don't know, or if this fence bylaw needs to be amended in some way. Because I know I have a problem with a fence in my area, and I know everything about this fence bylaw is not perfect.
Let the director weigh in.
Sure.
on that
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, the remedy would be the application that Mr. Shea applied for, which is an amendment to the DA, which would allow the fence that's there to stay. So there is a path open to council if you choose to take it.
I'm going to make that motion that we do that.
Just a reminder, Mr. Chair, that, so there was a motion coming from PAC to refuse the application that was tabled.
Yep.
So, Shirley, if you want to comment on what sort of motion PAC could make in light of that, or?
I'll turn John on, Director off. Shirley?
Right, no problem. So the recommendation that PAC made to council previously was to refuse the application to amend the development agreement. So that was tabled. Only council can deal with that motion. So on council evening, that motion could be raised and lifted from the table, and then council can decide what they want to do with it at that point. They can defeat it, amend it. If you defeat it and want to make an alternate motion, that can all be done at council. If you want to make a recommendation through PAC committee today, you can do that as well. But that motion, it could sit on the table forever. There's no requirement to lift it, but council has to decide the path that you want to take.
So, through the chair again, there's no point of making a motion here tonight or today?
There's no requirement to make
There's no
one today.
requirement? We
No,
might as well wait until,
you could do that.
okay, well, that's about all I have to say. Like, those are my thoughts. There's no question he broke a rule here. The bylaw, to me, it comes down to what's the reasonable, best thing to do here in this circumstance. And, there's others that probably have a different opinion, but I'd try to find a way to work with him. He seems like he's the type of person that would try to work with the neighbor. We're not here to talk about the lights, but it sounds like he's prepared to do something with the lights. And just what I hear about him, he's the type of person that would try to help, work out any situation. But he's got this fence up here now, and that's his dilemma.
Is that all,
That's it.
Counselor?
That's it.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Shirley, for your explanation. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. A few points. No one is here to debate how nice or unnice Mr. Shea is. He seems to be a perfectly polite and, nice gentleman. That has no bearing on this, in my opinion. I'm not making this decision based on personality or how nice or great or whatever anyone is. The point is, and I will say, my memory of the DA agreement discussion differs a little bit. So I'm not sure I didn't move the amendment that required the fence to go to 8 feet. I'm not sure. And it was definitely a wooden fence. That was in the motion, wooden fence. And that's my memory of it. I guess it's very difficult, especially, you know, I've been here a long time. And we bring these regulations and a chain link fence is not permitted in that zone. And my understanding is that had your application for a development agreement been made, and had you said a chain link fence, staff would have recommended against it because it's not allowed in the zone. I have had discussions with folks I know who live in the area who happen to live in the same zone, who are not happy because they've discovered they can't put a chain link fence up on their property line. And if we allow a chain link fence in this situation, then how do we justify to other people that they're not able to do it? That's the situation that it puts me in. And if the majority of council believes that a chain link fence should be allowed in this zone, then that's something that should be looked at. But for this particular issue, it was wooden fence, signed legal contract, requiring something different now. To me, maybe it doesn't legally set a precedent, but to me, it makes it very difficult to explain to other people why they can't do that too. And it opens the door, I'm sorry, for some people who might be a bit unscrupulous to just build a chain link fence and say, oh, well, he did it, or, oh, well, we didn't understand, but, you know, it's there now, so let's let it stay. That therein lies the problem. And I'm also going to comment, I know you mean well, sir, when you offer to make a donation, but the offer of monies to council, whether it be through council to a charity that council would choose or otherwise, is extremely uncomfortable for me. The appearance of that to the public is that if a developer comes in and gives money to someone council wants to have money, well, you can see the optics. And so I'm not interested in that. So it's an unfortunate situation. I wish we weren't in it. From the picture that I saw, it's not an opaque fence. It wouldn't do, I don't suspect, a lot in blocking like headlights, or certainly not sound. So I'm not here to debate the merits of whether this is a better choice than the wood fence, because I don't think that's what we're here to do. We're here to debate whether or not we're going to uphold the contract that was signed and agreed to, or whether we're going to allow a variance on it. My stumbling block for allowing the variance are those things that I said before, but I think it opens a lot of doors that we're not perhaps in a position to have opened right now. I think it would have to open up the entire regulation around the zone as to the type of fencing allowed. And that's not where we're at now. Where we're at, I try to look at things in as black and white a situation as I can, and at the end of the day, it was a contractual issue. I felt at the time it was clear it was to be a wooden fence. It's not a wooden fence. I guess I view it, you know, I've seen a lot of things. I've seen apartment buildings built with an extra apartment that wasn't allowed, that was picked up on. And, you know, you just get to a point that that's what the regulations are for. That's what the development agreements are for. And right now, I'm really struggling to see my way clear. When I just look at the black and white facts, I am probably still leaning on supporting the original motion, which would be to deny the amendment. And there's nothing personal there at all. It's all based on the regulations that were in place, the agreement that was agreed to, and the fact, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, that if someone came forward in that zone and requested a development agreement with a chain link fence, and I believe you've told me in the past that staff would recommend against allowing the chain link fence, and that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I'll get back to you. Next is Counselor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Well, I'm going to take exception to bringing a person's character into this conversation whatsoever. That is so inappropriate about whether a person's, vouching for a person's character. This has nothing to do with that. That is a beautiful building that a lot of thought and detail went into it, probably costly detail, that and came up with that beautiful building there. I live there. I drive by it all the time. I am not. I am not discussing that part of it whatsoever. The fact of the matter is that it's not the fence that was supposed to be there, and my compromise to this would be to put the wooden fence that is less see-through than that, and that's a fact, on the other side for the resident, whom is my main concern, the resident, and get those lights reduced and redirected and not motion lights, because that would just be flashing on and off. So I mean, that's a compromise. I feel like I'm compromising with that. But as far as a person's character, to bring that into this, very inappropriate.
Is that all, Counselor?
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Rhino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the warden and the councillor Cole summed it up very well. I don't make any decisions based on someone's character, and I haven't never done it in 25 years, and will not do it going forward. The bottom line is this was in the development agreement, whether it was missed, somebody has to sign off on that development agreement. I'm sorry, somebody should be really looking at those and knowing what they read, or reading it and knowing what they're signing before they sign. It was stated here that the problem was light shining on. A chain link fence, even with slats in it, is gonna let light through. So, right there, it's clear. And my biggest fear is if we go back on this, and the warden touched on this, if a less scrupulous person or company come in there and they say, well, let's do this, we're gonna get away with it, we'll just take it to council. And so that sets a precedent which shouldn't be. We have rules, they should be followed. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a small question. Would some of those evergreen trees, like on the other side, be put there for the light not to go through? I think it's better for the environment. Instead of cutting more trees to build the wood fence, would be good to put some trees that block the lights. If they agree on the other side to put some green trees, like whatever they call them, I don't know. But I think that's a better idea instead of having two fences side by side. And it's better for the environment too. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Tingley.
Through you, Chair, I just want to respond to the comments my fellow councillors are making about, it's really directed at me for making inappropriate statements about somebody's character. The only thing I said was a good thing about his character, and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that I believe what he said, or saying something nice about somebody's character. I don't see how you can fault that. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong there, and I just want to respond to that comment. I just thought it was a shot at me for saying something inappropriate, and I don't know how you can be inappropriate when you're not saying, when you're saying nice things about people.
Thank you, Counselor. Deputy Warden Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like many of my fellow councilors, we struggle with setting precedents and doing different things. And what I look at is, what was the intent of a wooden fence? The intent of a wooden fence was to provide an oblique screen that doesn't allow light and provides privacy. It's been stated by many that this does not meet that requirement. the local area counselor, which we rely on a lot of times for our decisions when something's happened in somebody's district, we rely on the local area counselor. He has stated he has 0 complaints in his district, in District 10. So I'm not set on what the way forward is. I really think building a secondary fence might be overkill as far as things go. I think modifications to the current fence, correct me if I'm wrong, John, through you to staff, the intent of no chain link fences in the area was for an aesthetics view, that the aesthetics would not look industrial, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So it's in the design guidelines for the core villages. More traditional materials like wood as opposed to chain link.
So I don't know if this is something we can do, but I mean, they make cladding in PVC that looks like wood that goes over everything. I don't know if it would be a possible scenario, and it would have to come from staff and through council for debate, but like cladding the metal poles so it doesn't look like a chain link fence, and finding a way to make it completely oblique where light does not pass through it to provide the residents that protection would be a modification I would like to see to this fence in some way, because to me, it's the intent of what the fence was supposed to represent, and it was to protect the residents on the other side from excess light, and it was to protect the aesthetics of our community, to make sure it fit into the community picture and landscape that was supposed to be there. I do agree that a development agreement's a development agreement, and when things happen, and you can hit it with a hammer, or you can look for compromise. But for me, the overall intent of what the original fence was supposed to represent, to provide to the residents on the other side, is the biggest priority. Ensuring that they get the privacy, the blockage of light, and the aesthetics of the community is protected as per the reason for mentioning the different products. So that is kind of food for thought on my part. I'm still mulling it in my head. I just had to kind of throw that out there for people to look at and understand. I don't know if it's even possible, but I do know you can clad poles to make them look like wood. You can make them look like anything you want. And the ability to create that fence as oblique, whether that's through screenage or some form of other type of material to block the light protruding through to the other side of the fence, I think would be key. And I think if any type of modifications were to happen, the more aesthetically pleasing side of that fence should face the residents, not the building, because this is something that has happened to change. So that would be kind of my school of thought. I still get a lot rolling around in my head, but overall, it's the intent of what the original fence was supposed to do, having that intent met to meet the residents' expectations. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Councilor Garden Cole, we're reminded that we're talking about the fence, and the lighting satisfies the development agreement, so will be a separate issue. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just, in regards to what the deputy warden said, when I had said a wooden fence on the other side, on the side of the resident, that wouldn't allow so much light, that's basically, if we can, as I say, this would be a compromise to not having to tear down the fence that already is erected. If we can get that is more aesthetically pleasing to the resident and also block more light, that is what I'm looking for as well. So I don't know if there's I said wooden and 8 foot, of course, because that's what was specified, or 7.9. If there is something else out there that would fit that criteria, then I would be open to that as well. I'm just concerned with how long that this is going to take to figure that out.
Is that all?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll give you a chance to talk at the end. Okay. Warden Rolston.
If he'd like to respond to Sandra.
Okay, just a minute. Mr. Shea, you'd like to respond?
Yeah, so I can own a construction company. I can get this done right away for you. Just want to mention it's going to be very difficult to put another fence behind that fence. Number one, I don't think I own that property, and number two, I'll never get a machine in there or anything to put another fence in. But what I could do is I could happy to clad the posts that are metal into a wood, and I could attach some kind of wood, whether it's like a privacy lattice or something, on the back screen for the neighbor, and I could do that immediately, and I'll take that light down, and that's no problem. I'm also have electricians. I am an electrician, so I can take that light down very quickly, and we'll just go with a lower light. I don't mind doing that for the residents right away. So, but in regards to trying to build another fence, I think that would be impossible, I think, but I could attach to it.
Thanks for your comments. Does that satisfy you?
Well, I mean, basically, that's what I outlined when we first got started on this. I realized that you're limited in putting post holes in there and whatnot when you've already got a fence right there. But yeah, I'm looking for the privacy for the resident and the aesthetics. And then as a secondary issue, it became about the overkill on the lighting as well. But yeah, that's ultimately what I'm looking for. It's a great building, and the whole thing is very nice, but I'm just concerned about the residents. These are people who had a vacant lot beside them. So, I mean, this is a huge change for them, and we just need to give them what we can to make their backyard private. So I'm happy with that if that's what council agrees to.
Thank you, Councillor. Any final comments, Mr. Shea?
Yeah. Yes. Just I know there's other residents and fences are an issue, and letting someone do a chain link. But I just want to point out that, you know, this the bylaw points to a 5 or 6 foot wooden fence. This is an 8-foot fence. So, you know, the bylaw is written obviously to keep it looking like a residential area. But when you ask someone to go from 5 feet to 8 feet, you're tripling or quadrupling the wind load on that fence, and it makes no sense to build an 8-foot wood fence that's going to fall down. And you know, and the other thing is, a wood fence is also going to let light through. You cannot build a wood wall of 8 feet. It's not going to last. And, you know, as a developer and as a businessman, if you're going to ask people to do things like that and not be able to pivot a little bit when something comes up that doesn't make structural or long-term sense, it's hard to deal with. And all I'm saying is, another neighbor putting up a 5-foot chain link fence 100% doesn't meet the bylaw, but this isn't a 5-foot fence. This is a 8-foot fence, and that could be your answer to the other people in the community, is that, well, we asked him to do an 8-foot fence to protect the neighbor, and an 8-foot wood fence will not stand up like this fence would. So I understand you're pointing to the bylaw, but I'm asking you to think about pivoting, because this isn't a fence that's in the bylaw. It's a different situation that's required. And again, I'm happy to make modifications with wood to try to make it look more appealing, and I'm happy to take the light down. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Warden Rolston?
Thank you. Well, it sounds like there might be some type of compromise. I'm just a little concerned. The devil is in the details, because we don't want to be back here hammering at this fence, excuse the pun, again in a month or two. So it was mentioned privacy lattice, and privacy lattice has the tiny, tiny holes, but it's not opaque. There would still be some light to go through there. But are we kind of in agreement that the privacy lattice together with the slats in the fence might be enough? And if we are, I'm happy to I would assume that Mr. Shea would provide a plan of some kind to our staff, and I don't know just exactly what the logistics would be. I do think that if we do this, though, that we should revisit our bylaw, and perhaps just a minor language change in there that said fences of 5 feet or less shall be wooden opaque fences, or maybe, I don't know what the language is, that perhaps to allow something that looks like wood but isn't wood, something like that. Or, if we don't even refer to the fence, if we, the height. But I think we have to do something there that then we don't find ourselves in a situation again. So those are my comments. There is a motion coming to the floor on council. Well, it has been tabled. It can be lifted from the table on council day and approved or defeated. It could be left on the table and a new motion come forward. If a new motion was to come forward, it should really come as a recommendation from this committee. So I'm not sure, I'll give it a try. I'm going to move that Mr. Shea provides staff with details of modifications to the existing fence that he feels would meet the intent of having the fence there originally, and that staff bring those modifications forward to council for final approval. I don't know if that can be done by next week or if that puts it off another month, but I really think I would be more comfortable with the application to modify the development agreement. I think if council signs off on it, then we can move on from this, hopefully. So that's my motion. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder for the motion? Moved in second. I'll give John a chance to comment.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to remind council, so we would still need to go through the formal development agreement amendment.
Just a minute. Go ahead.
We would still need to go through the amendment process to make that happen, but that, I guess we would take that as direction through that.
Are we good, Warden, with this reply?
Yeah, I think Councillor Garden Cole might have
Just a minute.
some.
Mr. Shea, that might be doable?
Yeah, I can have everything to you next week, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. So what does that look like, John? What time? What's that process look like?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So if we get the information next week, I guess for council, I don't see any reason we can't have a public hearing next month to deal with the DA amendment. Sorry?
September.
Oh, sorry. Yes. There is no meeting in August, so it would be September.
That just seems like this is dragging on and on.
John, that's the earliest?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. We would have had to advertise for a public hearing this month, and we haven't, so there's no way to do it this month.
So there's no way of doing this without, okay, thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the only way to do it sooner would be a special meeting of council.
Councillor Cole, that's all? Councillor Reiner to the motion?
Yes, I will not be supporting the motion because I do believe that this should be the development agreement should be held accountable with no changes. It is what it is. The person signed off on this development agreement and should have known. So I'm not in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing nobody else to speak and questions being called, we'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed with a vote of 9-1, 12-1, with Counselor Rhino voting nay. Thank you, Mr. Shea, for coming in. Next item on the agenda, PLN 23-008, the Tire Man redesignation, rezoning, initial report. Leanne, she's over there. Okay, Leanne, you're free.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. So this is the initial presentation for an application that came in from the Tire Man for mapping amendments to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. So the subject property is located on Highway 1 in Mount Uniacke. The property total is approximately 2.29 hectares in size. And the property is split zoned regional commercial and rural use at the rear, and it is designated as regional commercial and rural use as well. And the property is located in the Mount Uniacke Growth Management Area. So the applicant has requested to change the designation of the rural use portion of the property to the regional commercial zone and designation in order to enable the expansion of the automobile repair and maintenance use that is on the property. So this was the initial site plan that was provided when the applicant underwent site plan approval. So they're looking to expand their business farther back onto what is currently the rural use zone portion of the property. So for policy analysis, staff will refer to our policies in the municipal planning strategy associated with the Mount Uniacke Growth Management Area, as well as our general policies related to amending the MPS and land use bylaw, as well as our policies related to expanding the regional commercial designation. So automobile repair and maintenance, that use is not permitted in the rural use zone. Therefore, the applicant has requested to change the zone to match the regional commercial zone and be consistent with the rest of the property. And if it's approved, the applicant will then have to go site plan approval process for the expansion of their business. Citizen engagement, so there will be an advertisement in an upcoming edition of the Chronicle Herald, just indicating that the application's under review. And as this is an amendment to our policy, a public information meeting is required. So if authorized, a letter will be mailed to all property owners within 300 meters, indicating the date and time of the meeting once it's been scheduled, and at which time residents will have the opportunity to ask questions to staff. So staff will continue to review the proposal to change the portion of the property to the regional commercial zone and designation. And a final recommendation will be made in the final staff report. So in terms of our progress, we're just at the initial stages for this application. And the recommendation is for authorization of a public information meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Leanne, for the report. Councilor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember this piece of land, John. I don't know if you did. This was originally in 2016 plan, all should be RC zone. And the guy wanted to sell it, and we had to change it to RU zone because the guy who was gonna buy it, he want to build a house on and a business. But now I think they're one of the biggest business in the business park, and they change owners, so the owner doesn't need any accommodation next to it. So I think it was in the original plan, and I don't see why not send it back to what is meant to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Deputy Warden Perry.
I'm going to move the Planning Advisory Committee recommends the council authorize staff to schedule a public information meeting to consider proposal for a portion of PID 45337722 to change designation from rural use to the regional commercial designation and the zone from the rural use zone to the regional commercial zone.
It's been moved and second.
Question?
Question being called, we'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Leanne. I'm getting it. Next item, PL 23-002. Not sure how to pronounce it. Sura Vista Development Limited, rezoning, final report, Leanne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the final presentation for a rezoning application for Pine Hill Drive. So there's 6 properties located again on Pine Hill Drive. They are currently zoned the established residential neighborhood R1 zone, and they are designated the established residential neighborhood designation. All 6 properties total roughly 6,000 square meters in size, and they are located within the South Corridor and Commercial Growth Management Area. So the applicant has requested to change the zone from the established residential neighborhood R1 zone to the 2 dwelling unit residential R2 zone in order to enable the development of semi-detached dwellings. The applicant has also submitted a plan of subdivision in order to adjust the property boundary lines for the lots, as right now they don't meet the requirements of the R2 zone. But on the site plan and through the subdivision plan, the minimum frontage, which is 18 meters, will be met. So this subdivision plan is still ongoing. So we did consult with the municipal solicitor regarding this approach with moving forward with the hearing, and it was deemed to be acceptable. So this is the site plan and that was submitted. So there's 12 dwelling units total, and these do meet the lot requirements for the R2 zone. So staff have referred to our municipal planning strategy policies associated with the South Corridor and Commercial Growth Management Area, the established residential neighborhood designation, as well as our general policies related to amending our land use bylaw. So it's policy RD 24 that allows council to consider rezoning from the R1 zone to the R2 zone, and policies IM 17 through to IM 25, which outline the criteria for amending the land use bylaw. And we did consult with Nova Scotia Public Works and Municipal Infrastructure and Operations, and there was no concerns raised regarding the road network or servicing capacity. And council's decision on the application is appealable to the Utility and Review Board. For citizen engagement, so there was an advertisement in the Chronicle Herald in April indicating that the proposal was under review. And as this application doesn't involve an amendment to our policy, a public information meeting was not required. So following first reading, we did send out letters and questionnaires to all property owners within 300 meters. So we sent out 110 questionnaires, and we had 11 that were returned. Some of the responses were regarding fencing along the rear of the property and whether that could be provided. There's no requirement in the land use bylaw for any fencing, so we can't require the developer to do that. There was some concerns regarding the increase of traffic along Pine Hill Drive. Again, we did consult with Nova Scotia Public Works regarding traffic in the road network, and there was no concerns that were raised. There was a comment on how the R1 and R2 zone are very similar, and therefore the increase in density is favorable. And the rest of the responses were supporting the development. So a public hearing has been scheduled for next Wednesday at council meeting. So we have sent out letters to all property owners, again, within 300 meters, letting them know of the upcoming public hearing. So So lastly, staff have reviewed the proposal to change the properties to the 2 dwelling unit residential zone. So staff are recommending approval of the application. And the recommendation is that council give second reading and approve the application. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Leanne. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. Could we go back to the map there, the diagram? I'm just looking for some clarification. I may have misheard. How many units are we talking about?
12 there. Go ahead, Leanne.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's 12 units.
It would be 24 units?
There's 6 properties with
Yeah.
1 semi-detached on each, so 12.
Because that's not what this shows.
Yep.
No.
This
Sony, and on lot 1A,
Yeah.
it shows a semi-detached dwelling. So I
This-
assume there would be 2 dwellings and that's semi-detached. And in lot 1B, it shows, and then nowhere in that diagram does it show lot 1A and 1B show those semi-detached dwellings adjoined to one another. So I'm just a little confused.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this is one lot. This diagram shows after, when they're built, they could be further subdivided so that each be on their own lot. So eventually there could be 24 lots, or 12 lots, sorry.
So,
So
but on each lot that's going,
this is one unit, and this is one
okay.
dwelling,
Okay, it's not showing one building, it's showing 2 buildings.
they're not linked dwellings.
They have to be linked if they're semi-detached. They have to be one building.
Yeah, there'll be one building.
That's not what that shows. John knows what I mean, right?
Just,
That's what was confusing me.
Yeah, I think I do, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, Leanne's right. After the lots are created, there would be 1 dwelling unit on each. They're calling them semi-detached, but they look like,
Separate dwelling units.
right. So what they could be are linked dwellings where they're linked at the footings, and they look like single detached dwellings, but they're actually not. By definition, they would still be considered a semi-detached dwelling.
So that just confuses me completely. It almost looks like it's a way to make undersized lots. What's the difference between allowing an undersized lot? When you said to me, semi-detached dwelling, I'm thinking 2-unit dwelling, attached. That's what I think. I don't think of them being attached underground where nobody can see anything. Is that something that's common?
It is, Mr. Chair. So in the R2 zone, you have several options. You can have a true semi-detached with a shared wall. You can have a duplex, so an over-under, or the link dwelling option. And we actually have several of those now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's just, okay, thank you.
thank you, Madam Warden. Deputy Warden Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. You show here the 6 lots, and then you show the potential for them all to be subdivided into individual lots. Once it's zoned R2 and they're subdivided into individual lots, would they be allowed to put another dwelling on that property?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no.
No? Okay. It's funny you mentioned about the linkage underground. I only saw that about 3 or 4 years ago for the first time, so I get the picture, but I totally understand what the warden was thinking when the first time you see this diagram. And currently in the R1 zone, everybody's entitled for a garden home, a second dwelling, or a granny suite, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in the R1 zone, yep.
In the R1 zone, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Nobody left to speak. What is your wish? We have a motion. Councilor Green.
I'll move the recommended motion.
It's moved in second. Question being called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Leanne. Last item for planning advisors is a plan update, a final report. Debbie, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The plan update process started in January of 2021. Comprehensive planning has to be implemented through the municipality in accordance with the minimum planning requirement regulations, and that's a provincial act. Staff have undertaken extensive community and stakeholder engagement throughout the plan update process. Council has used the feedback from residents to direct the contents of the community plan documents. Second reading and approval of the 2023 East Hansel Fisher Community Plan is now ready. Here I just have a chart just showing our citizen engagement throughout the process. So the citizen engagement portion of the plan update started in April of 2021, and that was letters to our joining jurisdictions and notifying them of the plan update. Then in May of 2021, we had a Zoom meeting with developers, which briefed them about the plan update. And during the summer of 2021, we sent out a plan update survey, and we had the results there in the fall. After that, plan update open houses in rural East Hants communities were organized, and that was for October of 2021. And there were 5 community meetings held. After this initial community meetings, we set to work and created background reports and presented those to Planning Advisory Committee from the spring of 2021 to the summer of 2022, with council direction ending in the first draft of the East Hansel Fisher Community Plan. We just then took that draft of the East Hansel Fisher Community Plan back out to the community, and we did plan update open houses and public information meetings, and that was throughout East Hants, and there were 7 meetings held, and that was in November of 2022. Then planning document changes, and so we came back to council, and then from December of 2022 to April 2023, the planning document changes were made, and that was based on community feedback and council direction. In May of 2023, we had first reading of the East Hansel Fisher Community Plan and authorization to hold a public hearing. And since we last met in May, we've sent out over 5,700 letters indicating the proposed zoning and advertising the date of the public hearing. Newspaper ads have also been placed advertising the public hearing, and it has been advertised as well on social media and on the website. And then our public hearing again is scheduled for next week. So since that citizen engagement that was started in May, we have had, as I mentioned, over 5,700 letters were mailed. And in response, we've answered approximately, as of the date this was written, 43 phone calls, 9 emails, 4 walk-in inquiries, and 2 meetings with residents were held. And I've had a handful of phone calls since the report was created, and a couple of emails as well. The July 27th public hearing has been advertised on the municipal website, on social media, in Pam's web, and in the Chronicle Herald. Our neighboring jurisdictions have been notified of the final documents and of the public hearing. And over 60 letters returned because of an incorrect address, property owner moved, or deceased property owner. And we have tried to correct the addresses wherever possible. So sometimes it's just people have moved in between, and our system might not be updated with other systems. So we've tried to correct them. But in the end, if they keep bouncing back to us, there's not much we can do. Comments regarding proposed zoning from the mailout. So we have had a variety of comments, and we've recorded some of those. So one of the largest ones is, how is zoning going to impact property taxes? We've had a lot of questions regarding that. Requests for more information on the zones and on the purpose of land use regulations in general. Inquiries if a new development was being proposed on neighboring lands. We had a lot of people think just that somebody was proposing something on maybe a neighboring piece of property, and they just want a clarification on that. A couple of requests for elevation measurements, so folks that were proposed to have the flood risk zone on the property, or Fundy flood risk zone. They asked just for the measurements to see how much above that the water measurement they were. So we've sent those maps out. A request for other zoning maps just to show the boundaries. Clarification on property boundaries and zone boundaries. So we've had a couple people kind of question the Fundy flood risk just because of the fact that land that's already been eroded has zoning on it because the property boundaries haven't been resurveyed. And without having those property boundaries resurveyed, we just have to take those into consideration. Questions on the route of rivers we've identified. Questions on possible agricultural zoning in the future. Questions about lawfully existing uses and watercourse greenbelt zone setbacks versus provincial regulations. So new content in the community plan. Planning Advisory Committee has reviewed and given direction on a range of topics throughout the plan update process. New land use policies and regulations include the following. And as part of the public hearing, we'll have a slide on these each and give more detail. But I'm sure everybody has heard the plan update information numerous times now. The creation of the rural use zone, rural use north zone, RU2 designation zone. The creation of the Fundy Erosion Overlay 2050 and Fundy Erosion 2100 designation zone based on the Fundy Vulnerability Study. The creation of the Fundy Flood Risk Overlay FF designation and zone based on the Fundy Vulnerability Study. The creation of the Milford Groundwater Overlay MGW designation zone based on the Milford Groundwater Study. Campgrounds are now considered by site plan approval in both the rural use zone and the rural use north zone. Amenity space changes for the townhouse R2T zone, the multiple unit residential R3 zone, and mixed use center MC zone to encourage better designed common amenity space that is available to all residents and larger private amenity space for townhouse units. Village core VC zone updates include an increase to the maximum commercial floor area of a single commercial premise to 400 meters squared before a DA is required, an incentive to preserve heritage buildings, and minor design changes to the form-based zone requirements. Parking updates for Shubenacadie to allow for properties in Shuby to use shared or public parking areas and to have public parking areas count towards the parking requirements. To start the design process of creating a shared municipally owned parking lot, and that's underway. Other changes as listed in the topic papers. So we had a couple omnibus reports, so we've included those amendments as well. And other items were discussed during the plan update process where no changes were proposed to planning documents, such as the issue of gravel roads and hockey stick lots. And again, we'll present a more comprehensive list of changes during the public hearing and go into more details about each of those new zones. So the recommendation is that the East Tangier Fisher Community Plan is given second reading and approved. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie, for your report. Councilor Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it's been a rough, rocky road to get here, and I'm going to throw a few more rocks in. It is, as you know, District 5 and District 6, we're all shoreline. We stand to lose, pardon the pun, the most of this. I've done a lot of thought on this. We did come to an agreement, to allow some structures here and there. But while all this is going on, the province has decided, whoa, we're not going to do anything right now. So that's going to leave a large part of the province with no coastal protection bylaws. I don't see where we should be entering into this discussion if the province isn't willing to dip their feet into the water. I've drove the shore from Keith's area down through to Walton. I can take you to spots that there's been no erosion in the 50 years that I can remember since I was a kid. I can take you to other spots that are gone that were there when I was a kid. But we're going to paint the whole shoreline with the same brush here on the vulnerability study that, don't get me wrong, I believe in erosion. I've seen where it happens. But there's other places, and I've talked to people too that haven't pulled a fence post in 20 years because it's washed away. I've talked to other people that's lost 10 feet, fence and all. It's an area we shouldn't be in at this time. When we started this whole process, the thing council all agreed on was that we want to make this as less invasive to the public as we can. And this is very invasive to a lot of people. It is, and on that, I'm gonna chuck it out there, it lives or it dies. I'm gonna move that we remove the Fundy Erosion Overlay Zones, FE 2050 and FE 2100 from the plan. And if those are removed, I would think that would make the Fundy Flood Risk Overlay redundant, would it not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, that's a separate regulation. So the first two deal with setbacks to deal with erosion. The third one deals with flood risk based on elevation. So some properties would actually have two overlays. They would have where they're low lying, they could, potentially flood and have an overlay for that, the FF overlay. And then they could also have the erosion overlays.
Well, it says here, located within the Fundy Flood Risk Overlay Zone. So it is. So if we do away with those two zones, I would think. But if that's the case, I'll throw that in the mix too, to have that until such time that the province decides, hey, we're going to dip our feet in the water, and they can come up with a solution. They've got much more money than us and way many more professionals to look into this stuff than we do. And I said, I've struggled with this, I'll be honest, I know there's erosion, I know places there's not. But when I look at that map and it's just one giant paintbrush on the whole shore, that's no good. No, it is. You're really trampling some things there. So that is my motion to remove Fundy Erosion Overlays Zones and the Fundy Flood Risk Overlay designation and zone.
We have a mover and a seconder for Councillor Green's motion, so on before, I'll give some leeway to Councillor Rhino.
Thank you. Much the same as Councillor Green. I have said here before and stated here before that I'm not a disbeliever in some erosion, but I'm not in agreement with that study that was done by the scientist here and passed that report in. I've said before that it should be individualized. Somebody should visit the site because, as Councillor Green said, there are places where there are erosion and places where there has not been any erosion in the past number of years. So why are we treating everybody and painting everybody with the same brush? I had a conversation this past Saturday evening, same thing. And he told me that he's been in talking with staff and pointed out some discrepancies within the map that really would have been cleared had you gone out and talked to the residents that are out there. I fully believe in the people that live along that shore and what they've seen and what they've experienced. It's worth a lifetime. More so that somebody's come in here and done a study that doesn't live here and doesn't understand the shore unless you live on it. So that's my thoughts, and I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Musa. Just a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking in favor of the motion. I voted against the whole thing the other day because of this. And I think putting restriction on those lots, we're better off take it away from them. At least they don't have to pay taxes on it because they cannot do anything with it. So taking their land, it's easier for them. At least take the tax away. But putting restriction like that, and especially the one thing that kept me held me back to is if somebody have structure and burn down, even though if he's in the same area, he can rebuild, but somebody else who have the same lot, the same risks, cannot. So that's not right. So either, I think we should wait for the province to do something, and probably they'll do something to protect it instead of limiting people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Musa. Councilor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we went a long way down this road, but I happily support this motion. The province isn't doing this right now, and I happily support this motion, and we will deal with it when they do or at another time, but I'm happy to back away from it. Thank you.
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things. The comment about the whole shore being painted with the same brush, I mean, that's not quite true. Like, what the study did is look at a series of air photos over time to try and figure out where the higher rates of erosion are along the shore. Was it perfect? Probably not. But, it wasn't just a standard, 10 meters or 50 meters, what have you. They did try to tailor those zones based on the estimated rate of erosion on each section of shoreline. And I guess from a planning point of view, I would argue that you're right, the province has sort of put a pause on what they're doing. I actually think that's more reason to do it at the municipal level for, if no other reason, consumer protection, so that people don't build things that are going to disappear in 20 years or 30 years. But that's, I guess a planning point of view. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. Yes, once the agricultural part of this whole thing was settled, this is the thing that I think most of us, at least in the rural area, have heard the most about. And the province, if my understanding is correct, passed their legislation, but they've chosen not to proclaim it for whatever reason. And I don't know what that reason is, but the fact that they have a reason causes me some concern. Number two, should the province proclaim their legislation, then we have two sets of rules over this land, which I think is going to be confusing, to say the least, to folks. I have spoken before, and I still have the visions in my brain of those houses washing into the ocean. Those are houses that are already there. And most people along the shore, we've gotten along without zoning forever, since the municipality was created in 1879, I believe it was, or something like that, by using common sense. And I know it's not quite as common as it used to be. But having said that, I'm listening to the councillors who have the shoreline in their districts. I've heard from some of those residents too. And I go back to the fact that the only reason we're at this discussion point at all is because the provincial government deemed it would be a good idea to force municipalities to put zoning everywhere. And early on, we did have a discussion, and I go back to that, and it was decided that what we were looking for our unzoned area was certainly to do what we had to do to meet the provincial requirement. But that was all we wanted to do. I think the term was the least we could do that would meet the provincial requirement. And this, I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing, but it's not a provincial statement of interest that I'm aware of, and it does go above and beyond. And having heard from the residents, knowing that the province has something on the books that may or may not be proclaimed at some time, I'm kind of prepared to support the motion and let it lie as it is at this point. And I don't think you're going to see a rush of people building structures on the edge of the banks of the Bay of Fundy. Hasn't really happened in the past, and I don't see it starting to happen. the requirement for rocking, well, in the area where my cottage is, most of the bank is already rocked when there was no requirement for it because people didn't want to lose their investment. It's another stretch of bank right there we'd love to rock without any regulation. We just don't own the land that has to be rocked, and we're trying to figure that one out. So anyway, with those comments, and I just, because this is an overlay zone, it won't require we go back to first reading or anything. Should this motion pass, we're still on schedule. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So the only difference would be when we get to the public hearing, we would, it's still part of the draft. It's still part of the draft document. Well, we would, I guess, inform the public hearing and council that PAC is no longer recommending those 3 zones and designations.
So the motion would have to be made again at the public hearing to remove.
Well, so your amended motion, I assume you would just amend this, yeah, there's a motion on the floor. I guess it would be fine either way. So that additional motion with the recommended approval motions working together, or an amended approval motion, I don't think it really matters, as long as it's clear what the intent is.
Okay, having heard that, I guess at this time I'm prepared to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Counselor Green.
When I looked at the studies, when I went back and looked at those lines, it certainly seemed like it was painted. Because when you go down through Burncoat in there, there's 75 and 80-foot cliffs there, and those were, in the overlay, were gone. And it's all uphill from the bay up to the Burncoat Road once you go down there. Like, I just fail to see. That's one of the things that I looked at, and I looked at it a lot, and I just fail to see how that line could be drew there with good science. Some of the science is good, and some science I don't think was good on that. And there's many parts when you go down the shore. And, you know, I've traveled the shore, in my memory, for 50 years, I can remember going up and down that shore. And one place that I'll point out is the Tennecape Wharf. Where the Tennecape Wharf was, that is unchanged to this day. From when the wharf was there to when they took the wharf out. Tide comes in and out there twice a day, like everywhere else, unchanged. The banks there, I have friends with camps around there in the banks, virtually unchanged in the 50 years he can remember us going there. So, you know, I don't say this lightly. No, I don't. Like, there is erosion, and there are erosion problems, as per se, over where the wharf was in Knoll. And in Councillor Rhino's area, up where the W.D. Lawrence was built, there's erosion there. But you can go to Anthony's Park, there's very little difference there, is there, Keith? Than when the other wharf was there and taken out. Like, you can still see the runners where the other wharf was. And it was a longer wharf than what's been built. So anyway, no, I stand by what I said. It's, we're in waters we shouldn't be in.
That's all, Counselor?
That's all.
Thank you. Deputy Warden Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't disagree that the people who live there know what's going on there. But if I just look all the time because I was interested in buying a piece of property up there. And guess what? There are properties that are selling there like hotcakes. You can't find property along that shoreline. And it's not everybody who lives there that's buying properties. People are coming in from away and they don't know the shoreline. A lot of people don't even know what the ocean is, where they're moving from. They think calm water is a place to swim. No, that's where the rip takes you out in the ocean. And people learn that the hard way when they go to beaches. I tend to agree, science isn't perfect, but it's the best thing that staff could present us with to give us a picture. And the only problem I have is the province doesn't do their part on a lot of things, just like the federal government doesn't do their part, but it shouldn't excuse us from taking a look at things to protect people as well. And I'm really torn because the only thing, and I will agree, that overlay probably is not perfect, but at least it provided anybody moving to the area the knowledge that this is an erosion zone, that erosion does happen here and that in some areas property disappears. I don't know if there's any way that when somebody comes in for a building permit or or something like that, that they can be, if there's some notification that you might not want to build that close to the water or that close to the shoreline in this area because of historical data. But this was the only thing that kind of let people know in this region you could be at risk. Now, I understand there's lots of areas that were probably classified at risk that never will be at risk. But there's a lot of people who also, you know, didn't think that one bad storm wiped out all of Pictou. That hadn't changed in 30 years, and that beach has been changed forever. It's just difficult. I totally understand the motion that's on the floor. And I see the point of view from the residents that have lived there their whole lives. It's anybody who's moving to the area or has recently purchased in the area. They don't have that corporate knowledge that those other people have. So it's just real difficult not to be proactive in letting people know what the risks are when they move to an area. And, you know, I guess it's their job when they buy the property to do their research on their own. But if there's no publications out there or nobody is letting you know, then how do you know? Where do you find the information? So I'm really torn with this motion.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Councilor Rhino.
Just a point of clarification. So if this motion passes, this is only a recommendation to go to council. So then on council evening, then we would have another vote with regard to this motion. So supposing this passed, and you say that when we go to the public hearing, then it won't be struck. It'll only be said that council's no longer pursuing, but it won't be struck from the document until it's sent to the province?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so you have a draft document now that's being presented at a public hearing next week. The question here is, what are you recommending? And if you recommend that a section be taken out, then that'll be added to the presentation.
Okay, but the document will be totally amended before sent to the province if this motion is passed here in that council.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
The document going forth to the province will have that removed.
Oh, of course, yes. If council approves a motion to remove it from the draft documents, it would be taken out before you give it second, or your second reading motion would include that provision to take those out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Rhino. Councilor Tingley.
Through the chair, I hear all the discussion about this, and I agree with the concerns of the other councillors about having this in our plan. But some things I disagree with. We're talking about some areas that are impacted by erosion and others aren't. Well, that's the hideous thing about weather. You never know when you're going to get nailed in a particular area. I can't support this motion because, you know, we've had a scientist or an expert come in and explain to us why we should have it. And, you know, from what I've read, I think there should be some planning around it. I don't know why the province is backing out, but I just can't support a motion to have no plan around this. That's it.
Thank you. Questions being called. Warden Rolston? Okay. Questions being called on the motion. Everybody understands the motion? We'll go to the vote. And the motion. And the motion has passed 9-4 with Councillor McPhee, Councillor Perry, public member, which one's two?
I don't know which one's one, which one's two, I'm not quite sure.
Okay, I'll go back. And Councillor Tingley, voting nay. Let me see if I go back here. And Public Member Stevens voting nay.
John, do we still need to move the recommended motion now with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So you would still need a motion to approve the amended document, I guess.
I would move we approve the amended document.
So moved and second that we approve the amended document.
And that includes all
Includes
those
that,
three
yes.
items? Okay. Any discussion?
Question?
Questions being called, we'll go to the vote on the amended document. And the amended document has approved 12-1, with Councilor McPhee voting nay. Thank you, staff. Shit, I get back here. Thank you, staff, and thanks to the public members. Enjoy your week, and see you next time. That includes the planning advisory for today. Motion to adjourn
into corporate.
and to corporate to finish off some items from this morning. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carried. You need a break? No, we're behind schedule 12 minutes, but it doesn't say anything about a break or anything.
Sail on till somebody hollers.
Council McPhee's already taken his.
Maybe take a break before policy.
There isn't no one, but it might be in camera, might be on.
All right. Call Corporate Residential Services back to order. There's one issue coming up, and so I'll turn the floor over to Councilor Garden Cole.
Well, what am I? Okay. So I just wanted to bring up the topic of the construction in Enfield. I've had numerous complaints. Obviously, you know, everybody is aware of what's going on down there. The provincial road has been torn up. So I guess the questions, I'm unable to answer all the questions. I don't have the answers to all of them. But I guess what people are wondering is, you know, what's the process? You go through, you get a permit to tear up the road when you're doing a development like that. And are you accountable for what you're doing, for if you're doing it correctly? Like, I need some more information on that. How long you leave the road torn up, things like that.
Through you, Deputy Warden, I can talk to work within the road right-of-way, and so along Highway 2 or any other provincial road, a proponent needs to apply to work within the road right-of-way to the province through Public Works, and that gets signed off and monitored by the province. As to criteria of what's acceptable or not, I don't have that information here today. That's to the purview of the province, and so if we had work request within a municipal road, we don't have set standards on timelines at this point, but it also hasn't come up as an issue to this point either. It's typically a a dig and a connection should take about 2 days tops. The current challenges of one proponent in the Enfield Elmsdale area on Highway 2 is definitely an anomaly, but also a provincial process and enforcement from a work within the road right-of-way aspect.
So then residents and ourselves can assume that the province is on that they are overseeing what's going on there, and that it's all within, like, it's been weeks. It's been weeks of being either open or else temporarily closed over, and right now it's just big ruts, and cars are creeping down in there, bottoming out, like damaging their. I have emails every day about it, and people are wondering, myself included, if the province is overseeing what's going on there, or what. I guess, is that something we need to reach out to the province about?
So Councillor Garden Cole, would you be looking to make a motion to ask staff to contact the province to see what their update is on this road?
I'd like to make a motion that staff contact the province to see what's going on with this road and how it can move along better, to check into what's going on with this road.
Moved and seconded. On before the motion was starting with Councillor Rhino.
The process is correct. This is a provincial issue, whether you pause it, and if you're granted to work, then you do it, and then it's supposed to be fixed back up to they have a period, and when it is, it's supposed to be inspected again to make sure it meets the province's okay. I would suggest that trying to contact the area manager for East Hants, and then try from that way and see where this ends up, to see if we can get some relief for the people that use that trunk tube.
Thank you, Councillor Rhino. Next up, Councillor Tingley.
Through the chair to Jesse. I just have a question about this as well. That area has been torn up, like Councillor Garden Cole says. It's a really bad condition. Like, it's, I can't believe they walk away from that for days and just leave it in that condition. The dirt that's piled up around the curbs and everything, it's just in bad shape. The gates are left open. The trench that Councillor Garden Cole reported there, unfenced.
Councillor Tingley, you were on after the motion. The motion is to contact about the road, not the property, the road.
I got a question about this.
Bylaw enforcement's in camera.
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at what point can I ask a question about this?
You're asking a question about the condition of the road? That's fine.
No, I'm asking, what I want to get to is, we've been talking to staff about this. I think some of this is a violation of even the labor laws.
Then that would be an in-camera legal discussion.
Okay.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. We're missing one vote. All the votes are in. It's passed unanimously. Do you want to make the motion to go on camera, Warden? Yeah. Warden Rolston.
I would move to go in camera, the purpose to discuss a contractual issue and perhaps any legal issue discussions that might arise from that.
All right, we have a motion to go in camera. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hebb. All those in favor of moving in camera to talk about a contractual and legal issue, say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion's passed. We will move into camera and we will wait for We're good? I'd like to report, we met in camera to discuss a legal and contractual issue, and from that in-camera session, we have one motion coming forward. Counselor Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that Corporate and Residential Services Committee recommends that council approve an additional $72,000 to Project 22-023, Road Gap Project 2, to be funded from the contingency reserve, and to approve an allocation of $42,085 to the Rural Fire Capital Fund from the contingency reserve, and also to allocate an amount of $67,702 to the Mount Uniac Recreation Fund from the contingency reserve.
Moved by Counselor Green, seconded by Counselor Hebb. Any further discussion on the motion? Questions been called, we'll go to the vote. The votes are in, and it's passed unanimously. This brings us to the end of our schedule for today, and there will be no policy meeting following committee. So I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn committee. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.